At the start of 1801, the kingdoms of Great Britain and Ireland officially became the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. In fact, though, the island of Ireland had already been ruled by English and Scottish, later British, kings and queens for centuries by that point. Yet today, most of Ireland stands as an independent republic. So, how did that happen? What made the Irish want to break away from the United Kingdom, and why was it that they ended up leaving a part of the island behind? Why and how did Britain lose Ireland? Well, Irish independence was as much a result of failures made in England as it was a triumph of Irish nationalists. The Anglo-Irish War, or the Irish War of Independence, or the Irish Rebellion, depending on your point of view, broke out in 1919 and lasted through till mid-1921. It was a war of partisans, assassinations, police, and paramilitaries engaged in street battles and rural hit-and-runs, not of traditional battle lines or World War I-style trenches. It eventually ended with the Anglo-Irish Treaty, which cemented Ireland's partition in 1922, only for the Irish to fight each other over whether to accept that. But Ireland's breaking away, and the chaos that came with it, were never inevitable. The fighting of 1919 to 21 took place primarily between the Irish Republican Army and the Royal Irish Constabulary, an Irish police force loyal to Britain. The IRA also fought against Unionist militias in the more Protestant north of Ireland, and eventually the British Army. The bulk of the violence took place in Dublin and Belfast, Ireland's two largest cities, while most of the countryside was under de facto Republican control from early 1920 onwards. British authority was centred in Dublin Castle, in the persons of the Viceroy and the Chief Secretary for Ireland. Their IRA enemies answered, more or less, to the government of the Dáil Éireann, an Irish assembly established in 1919 by the nationalist and Republican party Sinn Fein. The party leader, Eamon de Valera, headed Ireland politically for most of the war. Founded by journalist Arthur Griffith in 1905, Sinn Fein rejected the legitimacy of the Acts of Union 1800, which originally merged the Irish and British parliaments. Griffith's more moderate starting call for a dual British-Irish monarchy modelled on the Austro-Hungarian Compromise morphed into Sinn Fein having, by 1917 under de Valera, disavowed the monarchy to become the leading advocate of Irish republicanism. At the 1918 British general elections, Sinn Fein won 73 of the 105 Irish seats in the UK's elected House of Commons. But rather than head to London, the nationalist MPs met as the First Dáil and asserted their independence, claiming all of Ireland as the Irish Republic and declaring British police and troops an occupying force. Actually, only a few met. Most of Sinn Féin's leaders had been arrested and interned in England on flimsy charges of wartime German collaboration. But by April 1919, the Dáil Éireann was meeting in full and setting up a separatist state. Many of Sinn Féin, including de Valera, had been freed by one Michael Collins, the most prominent IRA man after its early leaders were executed by the British. Officially the Dáil government's Minister of Finance, he acted as the Republican intelligence chief, planning IRA attacks on British officials. Eventually he would form a special IRA unit, the Squad, to counter British intelligence, take out RIC and Dublin police inspectors, and to hunt down plainclothes officers or double agents attempting to undermine the nationalist campaign. From 1916, the UK government, to which Dublin Castle answered, was led by David Lloyd George at the head of a Liberal-Conservative coalition. It then won the 1918 general election in a landslide across England, Scotland, and Wales. Some sort of British presence in Ireland dated back to Norman conquerors who'd sailed over 800 years ago, and in most of early 20th century Britain, Ireland was seen as an integral part of the country. That was particularly true of Protestant Northern Irish Unionists, denizens of Ireland who saw themselves firstly as British, and their Conservative Party allies. It was not as true in the rest of Ireland, and throughout the 19th century, Catholic Irish politics had been focused on achieving local autonomy, home rule for Ireland, if still technically remaining within the UK, an idea which had variously been blocked or bungled in London. While January 21st, 1919 is usually cited as the closest thing to an official start of the War of Independence, the date the Dáil Éireann first publicly met, and that 3 RIC constables were killed at Soloheadbeg in County Tipperary, the crisis that caused the war really began with the third try at passing a Home Rule Bill in 1912. Most Irish were Roman Catholic, in contrast with a Protestant-dominated Britain, and within that Catholic majority, the idea of a local parliament had widespread support. The Home Rule's biggest proponent, the Irish Parliamentary Party, won elections for decades advocating for it. It was only unpopular in the province of Ulster, where Protestant communities, many descended from 17th century English and Scottish settlers, detested the idea of a Catholic-led government, as well as any potential threat to their British citizenship. In Belfast, Protestants, led by Sir Edward Carson and the Ulster Unionist Party, mobilised nearly 500,000 signatures against it and began arming themselves to form the paramilitary Ulster Volunteers. In parallel, Catholics raised the Irish Volunteers, a precursor to the IRA, and the island was on the brink of civil war when an Austrian archduke was assassinated in June 1914. Largely because of strong sympathies for the Ulster Unionists in London, it took 2 years for the IPP with the Liberals to get Home Rule through Parliament. That caused enough Irish indignation, and then World War I saw Home Rule's implementation suspended. Hundreds of thousands of Irishmen signed up to fight for Britain, including plenty of Catholics, but some, influenced by the clandestine Irish Republican Brotherhood, saw the war as an opportunity to challenge a distracted British Empire. The Brotherhood kicked off the first violent Irish insurrection in over 100 years by planning the Easter Rising in 1916, attempting to seize key locations in Dublin for an Irish Republic. They failed miserably, but the British response, summary executions of the Rising's leaders, Michael Collins and Damon de Valera notably surviving, only fueled Republican sentiment. The Easter Rising's dead became public martyrs, and nationalists surged into Sinn Fein as a new vessel for their cause. The other response to the Rising from the Lloyd George government and the IPP's John Redmond was a convention of Irishmen from across political lines, which was called, only to be undermined by a British attempt to conscript the Irish in the last year of World War I, which was opposed by Republicans and the IPP alike. For continuing to work with London, Redmond's party was eviscerated in 1918 by Sinn Fein. Besides Lloyd George, key British leaders included Winston Churchill as Secretary of State for War and General Sir Neville Macready as Commander-in-Chief of Ireland, while for most of the conflict, retired Field Marshal Viscount French and Sir Haymark Greenwood oversaw the RIC and headed affairs at Dublin Castle. As the fighting escalated through 1919 and 20, both sides would target civilians accused of treason in one direction or the other, and Greenwood and French would employ state terror against the fervent Irish nationalist insurgency. Through the summer of 1919, isolated RIC stations in the countryside were evacuated by the police. Holding their posts in the face of overwhelming local animosity was simply untenable, and without them, control over law and order was ceded to the Dáil and its courts. IRA units took up civil duties. By the beginning of 1920, Republican institutions had replaced the Crown on most of Ireland outside of Ulster. To supplement the constabulary, which suffered from low morale and desertion by Catholic Irish officers, ex-soldiers, termed Black and Tans by the Republicans, were recruited into the police, and more World War I veterans were organised into a militarised RIC auxiliary division. The Black and Tans and the auxiliaries became notorious for brutal reprisals. Intended to push the population away from the IRA, their measures, including attacks on civilians, arson, and just general thuggery, severely backfired. Britain may as well have written the nationalists' propaganda for them. In part, that was an inevitable result of sending soldiers to do policemen's work, but it also reflected a certain disregard for the Catholic Irish across most of British politics. Keen, though, to show the public and the world that there was no war in Ireland, merely disturbances against good civil order, at the end of 1920, the coalition government passed the Restoration of Order in Ireland Act. Authorised by it, thousands of Irish were interned without trial, martial law was imposed on Munster, and reprisal burnings of buildings suspected of having links to the IRA were given official sanction. Notably, much of Cork was burnt down in December, accompanied by the looting of the city and attacks against civilians who got in the way. That same month, the Government of Ireland Act 1920 intended to make everyone happy by creating two Irish parliaments, one for Protestant Ulster and another for the South. Of course, in reality, that was far too compromising for Unionists and nowhere near enough for Irish nationalists. In November 1920, Collins and the Squad orchestrated coordinated assassinations of British intelligence officers in Dublin. In retaliation, British forces opened fire on a Gaelic football match on November 21st. Bloody Sunday precipitated the most violent period of the war, through till summer 1921. The actions of the Black and Tans and the auxiliaries eroded British support both at home and abroad, and particularly harmed relations with an ever more influential United States. Meanwhile, sectarian troubles in Northern Ireland added to Britain's mess. May 1921 highlighted the limitations of the IRA when its volunteers seized and burned Dublin Customs House, the most daring action there since the Easter Rising, only for virtually all of them to be immediately taken prisoner. It would soon become clear on both sides of the Irish Sea that no one could win this war decisively anytime soon. George V proposed a truce, and an Irish delegation was sent to London in mid-1921 to negotiate a proper end to the fighting. It included Griffith and Collins, but notably not De Valera, who remained in Ireland as President of the Republic. While still leading Sinn Fein, he had actually spent most of the war in the United States, rallying Irish-American support for independence. Britain's negotiating red line was the matter of Irish republicanism. The UK never recognised the Dáil's Irish Republic, and only met the Irish delegates on the grounds that they were technically still British MPs. The Anglo-Irish Treaty, signed that December, was a compromise, and determined that most of Ireland would have self-rule within the British Empire as a dominion, much like Canada or Australia. The government of the so-called Irish Free State would be obligated to swear fealty to the king and follow British foreign policy, but otherwise could run itself largely without interference. The Northern Parliament had the right to opt out of the Free State, which it immediately did. In the South, the treaty split nationalist opinion. It barely passed through the Dáil, and the double blow of the Royal Oath and their island's partition infuriated many within the IRA and Sinn Fein, including De Valera, who resigned as president in protest. The Irish Civil War, fought between pro- and anti-treaty forces, was won by those who could accept the Irish Free State. Nevertheless, De Valera returned to office democratically at the start of the 1930s, and with Britain being somewhat distracted at the time, he would lead Ireland fully out of the UK's shadow to become the modern Irish Republic. The insurgency that forced Britain out of Ireland came to be a model for modern guerrilla warfare. Both sides of Spain's civil war in the 1930s drew on IRA tactics, and in the 1950s, Algerian rebels would use them against France. To find out more about either of those, you should check out the videos to the left. If you enjoyed this one, they should be right up your alley. And, as always, I've been James, and thanks for watching Look Back History.